Hi, everyone, and welcome to the spring cleaning webinar series, Patch Management Hygiene. This is the first of our four-part series, Patching Made Simple Through Automation. My name is Matt Coker, and I'm a security architect with Champion Solutions Group. With me today is Dan Powers, who is a BigFix expert and all-around nice guy. So before we get started today, I did have a few questions for our audience to kind of fill out who has experience where and just see who is where and who we're talking to, kind of gauge it. Kevin, if you want to hit the first one. The first one is just, do you already own BigFix? And if you don't mind, just please select yes or no. Okay, wow. So, okay, about maybe what, 85% maybe we're looking at there, Kevin, maybe 90. For those of you that do own it, how long have you had it? Is it less than a year, over a year, more than 3 years? Okay. And just curious, is there anyone out there, using other endpoint management tools similar to BigFix, maybe such as, Case or SECM? Excellent. And lastly, are you guys using any other modules inside of BigFix?
Any other modules besides patch?
I mean patch, excuse me. Thanks, Dan. Okay, great. So a couple of you out there. Excellent. And thank you for your participation in this. This is just, we're doing 4 of these in a row, and we do have a mix of people with, different experiences. So we're just going to keep building as we progress in this 4-part series. And the first part today is, more of an intro, kind of an overview and a discussion and intro. So let's begin. Let's start with, why endpoint manager, BigFix and the basics, and what we're covering today. We're going to be talking about the agent itself, deployment of it and how easy it is to get it out there on your endpoints, the relays and why they're important, and the scalability of them into your network and your ecosystem. Patch and other modules that's included inside of BigFix. And then, of course, we're going to actually see some demo of taking action and patching a few machines, and then we're going to touch on reporting a little bit. The last 10 minutes, we're going to open it up for questions. And this is a 30-minute part series, but if questions go over a little bit, we're definitely going to stay on and answer as many as we can get done, okay? All right, so let's start with the modules of BigFix. I know we're here to discuss patch, but I did want to point out a few things. The same process and ability does run across 50+ different operating systems. So all of your Linux, Unix, Windows, and Macs can be supported. The solution scales very well up to 250,000 endpoints per one BigFix enterprise server install. You can start with patch, and you can also expand to other modules within the same infrastructure. It has a very robust architecture with a built-in failover. And again, this is the single solution on a single console, and of course, the single agent. So to access any one of these different modules inside of BigFix, you just need a license to tell it, hey, it's okay. So while you can just start with patch and just install patch itself, lifecycle management and security and compliance modules both contain patch within them, as you can see here. Both offer components that I think a lot of you might find interesting, maybe expanding your BigFix package. Compliancy for security checks, vulnerability beyond patching. It really has a out-of-the-box compliance, and that's very important when it comes to like PCI and HIPAA compliancy and people looking to take control of this. Lifecycle has OS deployment inside of it, which Champion itself takes advantage of when helping our clients make the jump from Windows 7 to Windows 10. Also inside of Lifecycle that's very important, I think, is the power management piece. And while you might not have an interest in this just to save money on power, so to speak, it can be leveraged in patch management, controlling wake on LAN. And this can help make sure that these devices that have fallen asleep or have gone to rest during patch cycles are woken up for this. And if you're trying to start any kind of green initiative too, you can also access reporting showing you where power consumption is and where these machines are powered off and on in the environment. And this is helpful. You can take the information back to your committee, your board, or even the power company. So when discussing the agent of BigFix, it is a single agent system. So I can do all of these different modules, these different features within a single agent, and he operates over a single port, 52.311 by default. UDP, TCP-based protocol, and you can even secure it. So implementing and deployment is extremely simple. You don't have to ask network teams to open up all these different kind of ports or firewalls for me. It's just running over a single port and a single agent in your environment. We typically install BigFix in your data center somewhere, wherever that is, and you can do it over Linux or with DB2 or Windows and SQL. When new patches come out, vulnerabilities, these checks come out, IBM has a special team that is constantly monitoring this stuff, and they create what is called a fixlet, and that's just their terminology. A fixlet is nothing more than it asks questions of machines, so all patches are a fixlet. And what it's doing is it's a very small piece of code that comes down, for example, and says, hey, are you a Linux? What version of the kernel are you? What's the hardware that you're running on? Are you applicable to this patch? And then, of course, it answers back these questions, true or false. That data usually comes down to your server once a day, and as new stuff comes out with patches and so forth, the BigFix server will deploy that data to the endpoints that are subscribed to that particular site. As you can see in this architecture picture, we have a couple offices here with relays set up, and obviously the other relays that are in the environment. This is to make sure the endpoints have relay resiliency, making sure that you're doing it as efficiently as possible. The idea here is that the data will go in any direction, but it's obviously easier to push it once and throttle it to the relays, so we're not hitting the network all at once, right? So even with offline or off-network patching, I can have a relay set up in my DMZ so that he can support and patch machines that are off the network. So it doesn't matter if someone is sitting at a coffee shop or flying 30,000 feet in a plane, they're still protected and able to be patched at the same time. So that's enough talk from me, Dan. I'll turn it over to you so we can actually see this in action and see the demo. There we go.
All right, thank you, Matt, for that. So as Matt had indicated, we do want to point out, we decided to do this in 30-minute increments, just not take a lot of people's time. And we're going to build, so each Thursday we do this for the next month, we're going to build on what we learned yesterday. And based on some of the polling questions that people had answered, we have a mix of folks that have been running BigFix for a while, and some people new to it, and actually a couple that don't even have BigFix. So that's why we like to give that overview from first of all, and I know it was very brief, but we do want to give that type of overview to folks for those that aren't that familiar with the BigFix side of it. So Matt hit on a couple points there in that last architecture document, which was very simple, but all of you looking at it can see how that document kind of works with your environment. So I want to reiterate what the relays are. The relays, there's no cost to deploy them. They can be supported on Linux, Windows, desktop machines, and so forth. The concept, of course, as we talk about patch management, is if in any given month, I'm going to be deploying patches in your environment, let's say it's going to be couple hundred megs I'm going to be deploying, I want to be able to push those patches once, for example, over a WAN link to that remote office. And then once it's at that remote office, to be able to hit all those endpoints at a higher speed, right? So very network light is the idea of the relays. And that's what also leverages or allows a single BigFix server to support 250,000 endpoints. So a couple little things that we like to do in our environment, and now that I have the BigFix screen up here, is I'm going to take a look. This is our lab environment, so it's always interesting to see how our lab will work with live demos, but we'll check it out. Is we like to add this location by subnet feature. So I leverage this quite a bit, and this is just talking about the health of my environment. So there is, if those of you that are familiar with it, there is a wizard inside of BigFix to help you import your subnets and can give friendly names to your devices and where they're attaching to. At Champion, we kind of took that and we have our own customized version of this that we ingest the subnet map, maybe from SolarWinds or your network team, and we can even automate that so that as endpoints move around, we are ensuring that they're attaching to the proper relay or the relay that's closest to them. The more complex your network, obviously, the harder this can be. And what I had done here is I've shown you location by subnet where these devices are, and I can click on computers. And of course, inside of here, I can click on some of the retrieve properties. Anything that I add across the top here can be shown up here on this side. So in this particular case, I'm just looking by relay. So if I start clicking on some of these machines, I can see by the relays that I have deployed what endpoints are talking to them. And case in point, which is interesting, is this particular relay I know is in actually our Florida office. So just to let you guys folks know out there, this BigFix environment that we're looking at actually is running from the Azure cloud. And we're supporting endpoints that are actually everywhere all over Florida, Atlanta, and even New York at this point. But again, one of the reasons I do this is I wanted to point out, because I know this is in a Florida relay, I got an Atlanta machine attached to this. So part of my health, right, and this is regardless if I'm doing patching, but just the health of the environment, this endpoint I know should actually be reporting up to the Atlanta relay up here where these guys are pointed to. So again, just trying to give that out to folks. If you haven't set up your relays, whether you're doing automatic or relay affiliation, this is going to go a long way to make sure your deployment, your health of BigFix is always well done from a network standpoint. And as it relates to patches, of course, is we can have small change windows. We have to move a lot of data around in your environment. And for those of you that have been currently patching your Windows 10 systems, besides the small updates, we know the major feature updates we're pushing basically a WIM image around, an ISO file, which could be a few gigs in size. So how your endpoints are talking to your relays is extremely important. So I always love to pull that out a little bit. So again, quick point I wanted to make there, and now we're going to kind of jump into the patch management side. So again, those that are familiar with the console, this should not be anything new. For the folks that we notice from the polling side of it, maybe you haven't seen BigFix or you're new to it. Down here at the bottom left-hand side is what we call a domain, and this is basically showing me what I'm licensed for and that I've turned on. So I drilled into patch management only. It makes the rest of this screen focus in on just patch management features, right? So I can jump to what I'm looking for very quickly here. So a quick thing I wanted to show about patch management from the first side of it is that it's going to show us the various patches broken out in this nature. So it helps me navigate to what I'm looking for. So one of the things I want to point out is if I look at OS vendors, as Matt had mentioned, BigFix doesn't just do Windows. We can do Apple, we can do Microsoft, Linux, Red Hat. It supports up to 50 operating systems. Inside of my demo environment, I don't have 50 different versions of operating systems, so they're not showing up here. But if I had AIX, Solaris, even ZOS, things of that nature, I would start seeing them here and populating it. But real quick, a couple cool things I can look at, since most folks, I'm assuming, do have Windows. We can drill into Microsoft Windows. And what BigFix does in this point is it's based on the vendor. So how does the vendor organize their information, for an example? One of the first things we notice, we have a warning here. This is kind of interesting to me. And we're looking at Microsoft Windows 7 going out of support. So just from a navigation standpoint, and let's see if I can zoom in here to make it easier for you folks to read. There's no real action per se with this. There's no action I can take on it. But BigFix is showing you that you have some machines in your environment. And again, according to Microsoft, that Windows 7 is going to be retired. It's more of a reporting piece in this sense, but it's kind of nice. But it does show us some of the flexibility, how BigFix works, and we'll drill into that a little bit more. But right here, if we notice, I have 17 machines currently in my demo environment. Only 4 of those machines are applicable for this warning, if you will. and I can come right down here and click on applicable computers, and it's showing me, and sure enough, these guys are running the Windows 7 operating system, right? So we know that's becoming end of life. But the look and feel is kind of what I'm doing here inside of this, whether it's patching, software distribution, or whatever. The look and feel of BigFix is very, very consistent. So I happen to just drill into that because I kind of saw it. The other thing that we can look at is if we go into, again, Microsoft patches and OS for applications. Those of us that are familiar with patching Windows, we know Microsoft shows us as security bulletins. If I click this, it's only going to show me the security bulletins. If I go, I have updates, I have service packs, I have patches that have actually even been superseded, right? So we get a very organized view, and we can keep drilling into this over and over. I could even come in here and say, well, let's just show me the critical updates. A lot of our customers and clients have SLAs around criticality. Critical updates need to be done in 30 days, 60 days, and so forth. So without even getting into the patching features, right from the console, I have this information at my fingertips. And a couple things I want to point out to folks is we're currently drilled into Microsoft Windows. We know this is 196, 5 critical updates. How do we know that BigFix actually queried our machines for all the different patches that are out there in the environment? Well, I'm going to come up here and click this button, show not relevant content. So if I click this button here, we're going to notice these numbers are going to change drastically. So if we notice for Microsoft Windows, there's over 13,000 patches that have been pulled down from the Fixlet server. And even a critical update, 791. Now, if I come over here and start scrolling through, you'll notice some of these are grayed out. Why is that? Well, in my lab environment, I have 0 machines that have reported back as needing this patch. They did run the question. They did run through the questions as Matt had indicated from the Fixlet, and they reported back false. So a nice feature here is I could remove non-relevant content in my environment, and it's just showing me what is relevant for my particular servers for what I'm clicking on. So it's a very powerful feature. And as I showed before, out of my applicable machines, in this case for my environment, I have 17 machines in my dev environment. And it's showing me this particular patch, only a single machine is applicable. This one shows 4 machines being applicable for it. So again, very nice, easy way to drill into what's available in my environment. There's nothing I had to do to make this data come to me. Okay, so as Matt had pointed out, that Fixlet content comes down from the vendor, in this case Microsoft. The BigFix system automatically distributed it through the relays down to the endpoints. The endpoints had run the Fixlets, all of them, all 13,000, and determined which ones were relevant and reported back to us. So it was nothing really I had to do about it. So a couple of things I want to look at here is for consistency. If I click on, I'm just going to take any random patch here for an example, and I'm going to drill into it. So the consistency of how you navigate the console is I have this description field here, and IBM/BigFix does not write this description. This comes from the vendor. So in this particular case, I'm clicking on a Microsoft Fixlet. So this came from Microsoft. But if I was down here, maybe under Red Hat, this information would have come from Red Hat or Solaris, whatever the vendor is. And it's given me information about this particular patch. So I can see a brief description along with the information from the vendor. If there's any notes to be taken on this, for example, most notes that are of high importance will be written in red. If you do see any notes written in red, you probably do want to take a look at what that means. But it's telling us, hey, most machines will report back pending restart. So another interesting topic when we talk about patching, and one of the reasons that I think BigFix does this a little bit different than other vendors, is if we deploy this patch, and let's say it swaps out a DLL that's in memory, some tools will report back, yep, I installed the patch, you're good to go. When in reality, until the box is actually rebooted and that DLL gets removed from memory and reloaded, we can't really consider the patch put in place. BigFix will not report back that the patch was successfully installed if it requires that reboot and until the box is rebooted. Once the machine is rebooted, BigFix agent will reevaluate all the different patches, validate that they actually have been deployed properly, and then will report back status, whether that's fixed, not completed, or whatever. But again, it's not giving me any false positive, which is kind of nice. Other notes, for example, Microsoft usually are including KB article numbers, which is kind of nice for those folks that maybe have a security team using Nexus, Rapid7, and they usually match up by CVE numbers or KBs. And another nicety is also showing us approximately, well, what is the size of this patch when I take action that I'm going to be moving around my network. So for those folks that have those remote sites, machines off network, you kind of can understand, hey, how much data am I moving during my patch cycle? So it's kind of powerful to have. If we notice the take action, how do we take action on anything? We click this button up here for taking action. By default, excuse me, let me see if I can get my mouse to work with me. The one that's in bold is called the default action. Some actions may have a single action, some may have multiple actions. And if I find an example here with multiple, we'll see it. But my point is the default action will always be in bold, and sometimes other actions that I could do aren't in bold, but I can take them. In this particular case, all this is going to do is open up my browser and take me to the KB article in question. So I can read about this right from the vendor site. So in this case, it didn't do anything to the endpoint, but it was a link to give me more information. So it was more of an informational thing, which was kind of convenient in this case. Now, I want to jump in here and I'm going to take the default action. And what this will bring up is another screen on my console, and it's showing me right away a few things. One is, even if I had 10,000 devices, it's only going to show me the devices that need this patch. So right away, I'm filtering down a little bit. So right on this page, I can select the different devices that I might want to target and hit OK. Another great feature is dynamically targeting by property. And in this case, I can target by groups, which we're going to get into more next week. We can target by retrieve properties. So maybe for an example, I just want to hit all the machines in the Boca office. So I can use a lot of default built-in properties or custom properties. Usually we're going to do it by groups. As I mentioned, we're going to kind of build upon this exercise next week. But the major difference is if I select a device and if I come back here and select the device, just these two, and hit OK, and this action goes and runs, these two are the only devices selected during the lifetime of this action as it's running. No other boxes will be added to here. If I dynamically target by machines, and let's say I dynamically target a patch, I need everybody to get this critical update out there for a vulnerability I know exists, and new machines come online later, they will automatically, if they're applicable, be added to this patch cycle. So that's the main difference between selecting a device and dynamically targeting by property. So I'm sure most of you out there get it, but again, by the polling questions, those that are new to BigFix or have not seen it, I always try to make that important distinction out there. The next piece I want to drill into a little bit is the execution. So by default, he's going to try to start this patch based on when I click this action button. And by default, it'll keep this action open for 48 hours. And then BigFix will automatically expire the action. I could adjust these things. I could also change the repeat date when I'm running things. I could select the days. We're going to get into a lot more of this as we build out this process in the next 3 weeks. But all I'm going to do in this case is show you that I'm going to target these machines and hit OK. And in the BigFix side of the house, let me drill into here so we can get a better view, is we're going to start seeing the machines. Now I've actually kicked off the patch. This will send this fixlet out to the devices. The devices will validate they still need this fix. And if they do, they will request the actual patch from the vendor. So let's just give a brief idea of how that works. The first time I kick off this patch, the endpoint's going to ask its relay, do you have this patch in your cache? The relay was going to say no. It goes all the way up to the BigFix server. From there, it's going to actually go out to the vendor site, download the actual executable throughout my network environment, and deploy it to these endpoints. If I kick this patch off again an hour from now, and some of my endpoints happen to be on the same relay, that relay will now have a cached executable of this patch, and I'll no longer have to traverse my entire network or go back out to the vendor site to pull this patch and get it. So if we notice here, we do get kind of nice updates from the system. So BigFix had automatically, this is another great feature of BigFix, is its real-time reporting capabilities, is we're going to notice that information comes back to us very quickly. This is great when you're patching hundreds or not thousands of servers. And we notice that the BigFix server already went out to Microsoft and pulled down the actual executable into the caching system itself. And now it's waiting to push it out to the boxes, and we'll get real-time results. So one of the things I'm going to drill into, because I got to be wary of time, and it's always an issue when we're doing these things live, is let's take a look at something here. I had kicked something off a little while ago to a bunch of machines, and these are the type of information that we'll get back from a quicker standpoint. Is here we're going to see what's completed, what's been downloaded, how the machines are working. And the other nice part about it is, which I love from BigFix, is we get a summary example coming back. So if machines have run and completed, I don't have to telnet to the box. This was something very simple, but I can see the timing that it was pushed out, how long it take to do it, was the patch successfully deployed? And in the case of a patch that had a lot of line items, I can see every step it took and validate without having to RDP to a box, without having to dig through log files to find the status of my patches being pushed out. Let's see if I can grab another example of one. For example, this one's probably a little bit better. I'm going to drill into this so you folks can see. And again, we can see every line where he pulled down the executables. He had to create some temp environments, but I get to see every single line and if it completed or not. If anything failed at any given point, it would show me, BigFix would show me exactly where it failed. Maybe it was a lack of disk space. Maybe the machine needed to reboot it. So again, I have this data at my fingertips, which is extremely nice versus digging through log files. So I know I'm getting hit by Matt for the time. This 30 minutes seems to go up really, really quick. I did want to really briefly, as we get done today, as I mentioned, we're going to keep building on these things as we move forward, is into some of the reporting. So I want to just point out 3 quick reports. This is not out of the box, by the way. This is on BigFix forums built by Lee Way. And it's, if those folks that haven't done it yet, BigFix forums, bigfix.me, user community with a lot of good content. I love these reports because it gives me a great a yearly 12-month rolling report of how well I'm doing on patches. What is my compliancy rate per month? So it's a great executive report, gives me a brief, good overview of where I'm at, but it doesn't tell me which machines. So there's some accompanying reports to this one, which is very nice. It's kind of same data that I'm looking at, but now I can see based on servers and my desktops, whatever I'm targeting, how well they've been patched during this particular filter, which I set for this month. And I can also see how many are missing patches. And the other compliancy report that goes along with this is it's actually showing me, again, the same type of data, right? But it's showing me actually which patches need to be deployed. So for example, I know I have a vulnerability in Microsoft Silverlight, and I have 3 machines that need it, and I am at 0% compliancy. A quick change of this, for example, I did do the Adobe patching earlier this week in this dev environment, just so I could show you, and I could tell that, hey, that update for Adobe, that was a critical update, was 100% deployed throughout my environment. So the reporting side is actually nice. We are butting up against the 230 scenario. So that was our quick run through of the patching part of this, or the live demo. Next week, so what we did, we gave a brief overview of BigFix. We kicked off a patch to a single machine. We kind of saw how you can organize your patches. But for those of you that have a large amount of systems to patch, it would be very tedious. So again, as we said, we're going to constantly build on this webinar. Next week, we're going to bring in the concept of baselines. That's going to help me patch send more than one patch out at once. Targeting groups, how do we target various different types of systems in BigFix, so we're not doing ones by ones. We're going to, again, relook at some compliancy reports based on those groups that we're going to build. And again, we're going to do this all in a live demo, and we're going to keep building on this. So as we're ending the next of this, and I know we said we're only going to do it for 30 minutes. If any folks have questions, we'd be happy to stay on here for a few minutes to answer them. But folks, I do want to just say we are going to keep building on this. The first webinar we're doing here, obviously we have a mix of folks that run BigFix for a long time and those that are new to it and those who've never saw it. So very basic. Next week, we're going to build on it. We're going to build it all the way to a point where we're really going to show you automation in action 3 weeks from now. So again, open it up if anybody has questions. I see people typing in. How are you adopting? Okay.
Yeah, great job, Dan. Just to remind everyone on the webinar that please enter your questions in the questions tab, not the chat, because we're not monitoring the chat piece.
So I do see somebody did ask a question for the web UI. Of course, we didn't show that this week. I will get into that. I think it's week 3 that we have it on there. So I'll give you my answer of it. The web UI at this point, and again, I've been running BigFix for quite a while, so I'm a little biased in my answer here. I'm very used to the console. I like all the screen real estate I get out of the console. And again, as an admin and somebody who installs it, there's certain things I can't do in the web UI. So I have a bias for the console, I have to say that. However, when we go to do new deployments at places and operators, executive views, can I make those executive dashboards? I do try to implement the web UI for those folks. But those of you that are on the line that are true BigFix administrators, you're creating sites, doing all this stuff. To me, the web UI is still not quite there yet to complete all that. Now, as it relates to patching itself, I do like some of the features in there where they're trying to go with it with the automatic patching, where you can set up your, hey, I got to roll critical reports, automatically go and do this. We do some of that, and we've been doing it here at Champion through automation before that web UI is put in place. So I know that's a really long answer to your question that you had put out there, Fernando. But I leverage the web UI for new installs that we go to for folks. But again, I'm being honest, I'm very biased and I still like using the console. So I hope I answered your question. I did the best I could with how I think you wanted me to answer that.
Excellent.
Do we have any other questions out there, folks? And again, we promise to keep these real short, 30 minutes, just to be, I didn't want to keep people on for hours at a time. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other questions, please send them in to us. We will answer them. I hope to see you next week. As I said, we are going to save this recording. We'll put it out, and next week we're going to just keep building on the things we learned today. Boom. All right, Matt, back to you if you have any closing comments.
Nope, that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll obviously see you next week where we'll get a little bit deeper, as Dan mentioned. And if you need any more information or have any questions, feel free to check us out on the website, championsg.com. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your week.